The first person I saw at my own funeral was my wife's boyfriend. And the worst part? She wasn't even trying to hide him. But before I tell you how I ended up standing outside a church watching my own funeral from the shadows, you need to understand something. I love my wife more than my own life. Maybe that was my biggest mistake. My name is Ryan Carter. 5 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Emma and I had been together for 8 years. Married for 6. The kind of couple people pointed at and said, I hope we have what they have someday. We never screamed at each other, never cheated, never played games. At least, that's what I believed. Every lie starts with trust, and I trusted Emma completely. The last morning I saw her, before everything happened, seemed ordinary, painfully ordinary. She stood in our kitchen making coffee while sunlight spilled across the countertops. I remember watching her and thinking how lucky I was. Funny how life works. Sometimes the happiest memory becomes the most painful one. She handed me a mug. You're staring. I smiled. Because you're beautiful. She rolled her eyes, the same way she always did. Yet she couldn't hide her smile. Back then, I thought that smile meant love. Now I know better. I was leaving for Seattle that day. A 3-day business trip. Nothing unusual. I owned a construction consulting company. Most of my work involved evaluating large commercial projects. The trip wasn't exciting. Just another contract. Just another flight. Just another goodbye kiss at the airport. If I'd known it would change everything, I would have held her a little longer. Emma wrapped her arms around me. Call me when you land. I always do. Promise? Promise. She kissed me, then watched me disappear through security. That was the last time anyone saw Ryan Carter alive. At least according to the world. The flight never reached Seattle. Halfway through the trip, everything went wrong. Turbulence, then alarms, then panic. The kind of panic that spreads faster than fire. Flight attendants running, passengers praying, people crying, the smell of fear filling the cabin. I still hear it in my nightmares. Then came the impact and darkness. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't dead. I wished I was. Every bone in my body felt shattered. Rain poured from the sky. Metal burned around me. The wreckage lay scattered across a remote mountainside. The crash had happened deep in wilderness. Far from roads. Far from help. Far from civilization. My phone was destroyed. My leg was broken. And most of the passengers weren't moving. For 3 days, I survived alone. 3 days. No food. Almost no water. No shelter. Just pain. Cold. And the desperate hope that someone would find me. Eventually, a search helicopter spotted the wreckage. By then, I was barely conscious. The rescue team later told me something that changed my life. The official passenger list marked me as deceased. Authorities believed nobody survived in my section of the aircraft. As far as the world knew, Ryan Carter was dead. I spent weeks in recovery, multiple surgeries, multiple complications, no access to communication, no phone, no laptop, no way to contact home. Every day, I asked about reaching my wife. Every day, doctors told me to focus on surviving first. Eventually, I stopped arguing. I assumed Emma knew I was alive. I assumed authorities had informed her. I assumed she'd be waiting for me. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. 6 weeks later, I finally returned home. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted it to be a surprise. A miracle. A moment we'd remember forever. I imagined Emma opening the door, crying, laughing, throwing her arms around me. Instead, I found another man's truck parked in my driveway. And that's when the nightmare truly began. I stared at the truck for nearly a minute. A black Ford pickup. Not mine. Not neighbors. Not anyone I recognized. At first, I tried to be reasonable. Maybe a contractor. Maybe a friend helping Emma. Maybe a relative staying over after everything she'd been through. After all, as far as she knew, her husband had died in a plane crash. The woman I loved deserved the benefit of the doubt. At least that's what I told myself. The truth? My ego was already screaming that something was wrong. Very wrong. The house looked different. Not dramatically. Just enough to feel unfamiliar. The flower beds were gone. The porch furniture had changed. Even the curtains were different. Small details. But when you've lived somewhere for years, small details matter. I slowly walked toward the front door. My heart pounding harder with every step. Then I noticed something. A pair of men's boots. Large. Worn. Placed neatly beside the entrance. The kind of thing you don't forget. The kind of thing that makes your stomach sink. I froze, staring at them, trying to convince myself there was a perfectly innocent explanation. I couldn't find one. Then I heard laughter. Inside the house. A man's laughter, followed by Emma's. For a moment, my entire world stopped. I hadn't heard her laugh in nearly 2 months. I dreamed about hearing it again, while lying in hospital beds, while fighting through surgeries, while wondering if I'd ever walk properly again. And now, the first time I heard it, another man was making her laugh. I moved toward the living room window, slowly, carefully, almost afraid of what I might see. Then I looked inside, and my heart shattered. Emma was sitting on our couch. My couch. The couch we'd picked out together. The couch where we'd watched movies and planned our future. And beside her sat a man I'd never seen before. Maybe 35. Athletic. Dark hair. Confident smile. One arm resting comfortably around her shoulders. Like he belonged there. Like he'd always belonged there. Like I never existed. I couldn't breathe. Not because of anger. Because of disbelief. The crash. The pain. The recovery. None of it hurt as much as that moment. Because in a single glance, every memory I had of my marriage suddenly felt uncertain. Then it got worse. Much worse. The man leaned forward and kissed her. Not awkwardly. Not nervously. Not like someone starting a new relationship. Comfortably. Naturally. Like they'd done it hundreds of times before. Emma kissed him back without hesitation. Without guilt. Without sadness. Without the slightest sign of grief. The woman whose husband had supposedly died 6 weeks earlier looked happier than I'd seen her in years. I stumbled backward, my injured leg nearly giving out beneath me. My vision blurred. I remember grabbing the porch railing to stay upright. Part of me wanted to storm inside. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to disappear forever. Instead, I stood there, watching, listening, trying to understand, because something didn't make sense. Nobody moves on that fast. Nobody. Not after 8 years together. Not after a marriage. Not after a tragedy. Unless this didn't start after my death. The thought hit me like a punch. And suddenly dozens of little memories came flooding back. Late-night phone calls she'd hide. Business trips she'd never invite me on. Moments when she seemed distracted. Moments when she seemed distant. At the time, I'd ignored them. Because trust makes you blind. Now, they look different. Now they look like clues. The man stood up. I should get going. Emma smiled. No ruse. He pulled her close. I'll see you tonight. Tonight. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Tonight. Like this was routine. Like they had a schedule. A system. A relationship. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Emma laughed softly and said, I still can't believe it worked. The man grinned. I know. Worked? My entire body went cold. Worked? What exactly worked? The words felt wrong. Dangerously wrong. The man left through the front door. I ducked behind a hedge before he could see me. A moment later, his truck disappeared down the street. I remained frozen in place. Emma's words replaying over and over in my head. I still can't believe it worked. What did she mean? The relationship? Moving on? Something else? I didn't know. But for the first time since returning home, I felt something stronger than heartbreak. Suspicion. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed answers. Real answers. So I did something I never imagined doing. I checked into a motel across town. Alone. Still technically dead. Still unable to understand what was happening. And completely uncertain about the woman I'd spent 6 years married to. That night, I barely slept. Instead, I went through old emails. Old bank accounts. Old records. Anything that might explain what I was seeing. At first, I found nothing. Then around 2 in the morning, I noticed something strange. A transaction. Large. Very large. Made 3 weeks earlier. The amount made me sit upright instantly. $2.5 million. My eyes widened. What? I refreshed the screen. Looked again. Still there. $2.5 million. Transferred into Emma's account. My pulse began racing. I already knew where the money came from. The life insurance policy. The policy I'd purchased years earlier. The policy intended to protect Emma if anything ever happened to me. The policy she'd apparently collected. Fussed. Very fast. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. Then another question appeared. A terrifying question. Why wasn't she trying to return it? If she'd been informed I survived, she would have reported it. The insurance company would have frozen everything. An investigation would have started. Mistakes happen. People are declared dead incorrectly. There are procedures for that. But Emma hadn't reported anything, meaning one of two things was true. Either she still believed I was dead, or she didn't want anyone knowing I was alive. The next morning, I decided to learn more about the mystery man. It took surprisingly little effort, because he wasn't exactly hiding. His name was Derek Lawson, real estate investor, divorced, known around town, and according to social media, very close to my wife, far closer than any grieving widow should be. The photos made me sick. Boat trips, weekend getaways, fancy restaurants, romantic captions, and the dates. The dates nearly stopped my heart. Some of them were from before the plane crash. Months before, maybe longer. Emma hadn't moved on after I died. Emma had already moved on before I died. I felt physically ill. Every promise, every anniversary, every I love you, all of it suddenly felt fake, like I'd been living inside a lie. But then I found something even worse. A photograph from the day of my funeral. The day the entire city gathered to say goodbye. The day my friends cried. The day my family mourned. The day my mother collapsed from grief. The day everyone believed I was gone forever. And standing beside Emma in the front row was Derek, not hiding, not blending in, standing proudly beside her, his hand resting on her back, like he was already the husband, like he was already replacing me. At my own funeral, I stared at the photo until my hands started shaking, because suddenly the title in the newspaper made sense. Beloved husband remembered. The church full of mourners. The flowers. The speeches. The tears. It had all happened while I was lying in a hospital bed fighting to survive. And somehow, the man sleeping with my wife had attended my funeral. I zoomed in further, then noticed something strange. Very strange. Derek wasn't looking at the casket. He wasn't looking at Emma. He wasn't looking at the pastor. He was looking directly at someone in the crowd, almost as if he was sending a signal, or receiving one. And, standing where he was looking, was a woman I recognized immediately, an employee from the insurance company, the same company that paid Emma $2.5 million. My stomach dropped, because suddenly this didn't feel like an affair anymore. It felt like something much bigger, much darker, much more dangerous. And I had a terrible feeling that my death had made certain people very, very rich. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the affair, not because of the betrayal, not even because my wife had brought another man to my funeral. It was because of that woman from the insurance company. The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Why was she at my funeral? Insurance companies don't send representatives to funerals, especially not executives. And after a little research, I discovered she wasn't just an employee. She was a senior claims manager, one of the people responsible for approving large payouts, including mine. At 3 in the morning, I sat in my motel room, surrounded by papers, screenshots, and notes, trying to piece everything together. The crash happened 6 weeks ago. My death certificate was issued unusually fast. The insurance payout was approved in record time. Emma received $2.5 million. And somehow a claims manager attended my funeral. None of it felt random. Then I found something even stranger. My death certificate had been finalized only 12 days after the crash. 12. I stared at the document. That wasn't normal. Not for a major aviation disaster. Not when bodies were still being identified. Not when several passengers remained missing. The timeline didn't make sense. Someone had pushed the process forward, and they pushed it fast. I needed answers. Real answers. Not guesses. Not theories. Evidence. The next morning, I visited someone I hadn't spoken to since before the crash. My friend Marcus, former military investigator. The kind of guy who could spot lies from a mile away. The kind of guy who never missed details. When he opened the door and saw me, he nearly fainted. For several seconds, he simply stared, like he'd seen a ghost. Technically, he had. Ryan. I nodded. His face turned white. Holy, he grabbed my shoulders. You were declared dead. I know. Your funeral happened. I know. Your wife buried an empty coffin. I know. Marcus looked completely stunned. Then he hugged me so hard my ribs hurt. For the first time since returning home, I felt something genuine. Someone who was actually happy I survived. An hour later, I told him everything. The crash, the recovery, Emma, Derek, the insurance money, the funeral photographs, the claims manager, all of it. Marcus listened quietly, never interrupting, never reacting, just absorbing information. When I finished, he leaned back and said something that made my stomach tighten. This wasn't just an affair. I frowned. What do you mean? He tapped the table. Your wife moving on quickly is one thing. The insurance situation is another. I nodded. Exactly. Marcus looked directly at me. Someone benefited from your death. The room became silent, because we both knew where that thought led. Over the next week, Marcus helped me investigate, and what we found was disturbing. Very disturbing. The claims manager's name was Angela Pierce. 42 years old. Worked for the insurance company for nearly 15 years. Excellent record. No major complaints. No disciplinary actions. Nothing suspicious, at least on paper. Then Marcus uncovered something. A connection. A very specific connection. Angela and Derek had attended the same university. Not only that, they belonged to the same private investment group. For nearly 8 years. My pulse quickened. What are the odds? Marcus laughed. Not good. The deeper we dug, the uglier things became. Derek's real estate business wasn't nearly as successful as people believed. In fact, he was drowning in debt. Millions of dollars. Failed investments. Bad loans. Hidden liabilities. The rich lifestyle was mostly an illusion. Just like Jason from the other story. Only Derek was smarter. Much smarter. Then Marcus found the first real bombshell. A phone record. One simple phone call. For minutes and 17 seconds. Made the day after the plane crash. From Emma's phone to Angela Pierce, the insurance executive. My heart nearly stopped. I looked at the screen, then back at Marcus. Neither of us spoke, because we were both thinking the same thing. Why would my grieving wife call an insurance executive 24 hours after my death? The answer was obvious. She wouldn't, unless they already knew each other. That discovery opened a door, and behind it was an entire maze of secrets. Within days, Marcus uncovered multiple calls. Not dozens, not hundreds, just enough to matter. Enough to prove a relationship existed. A relationship Emma never mentioned. A relationship she had hidden. Then came a second bombshell. A text message, recovered from an old cloud backup. Not illegal, not hacked, simply overlooked. A forgotten copy. And the message was sent 3 weeks before the crash. 3 weeks. I stared at the screen, unable to believe what I was reading. The sender was Emma. The recipient was Derek. The message read, "Once everything is finished, we'll finally be together." I felt physically sick. Marcus looked grim. Could mean anything. No. I shook my head. No, it can't. Because I knew my wife. Or at least I thought I did. And suddenly those words felt terrifying. Once everything is finished. Finished. What exactly was supposed to be finished? Our marriage? The insurance process? Something else? I didn't know. Yet. Meanwhile, Emma appeared happier than ever. Social media was full of photos. Weekend trips. Wine tastings. Luxury hotels. Smiling selfies. Every image felt like another knife. Because while I spent weeks fighting to stay alive, she'd been celebrating. But then something unexpected happened. A mistake. The kind of mistake guilty people eventually make. Emma and Derek attended a charity gala. A high-profile event. Lots of cameras. Lots of reporters. Lots of attention. Normally I would have ignored it. Except for one detail. One tiny detail. One detail that changed everything. On Emma's wrist was my watch. The watch I supposedly died wearing. I froze when I saw the photo. Because that was impossible. Absolutely impossible. The watch had been with me on the plane. I remembered putting it on. I remembered checking the time before boarding. I remember it clearly. Yet somehow, Emma had it. I immediately called Marcus. 20 minutes later, he was staring at the image too. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, he asked, "You sure? Positive? 100%? Without question." The watch wasn't expensive, but it was unique. custom engraved. A gift from my father. There was no way I'd mistake it, which meant one thing. Someone had access to my personal belongings after the crash. Belongings that were supposedly lost. Belongings nobody should have recovered. Unless someone had visited the wreckage records, or someone had access to evidence storage, or someone knew far more about the crash than they should. That night, I couldn't stop thinking. The insurance company, Angela, Derek, Emma, the watch, the text message, the timeline, the money. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together, but there was still one missing piece. The biggest piece, motive. Then Marcus called me at 11:47 p.m. The moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. His voice sounded different. Tense. Urgent. Ryan, what happened? I found something. My heart started pounding. What? A long silence followed. Then he spoke. Slowly. Carefully. Like he still couldn't believe it himself. The plane crash wasn't your first near-death incident. I frowned. What are you talking about? 3 months before the crash. Another pause. Someone tampered with the brakes on your truck. Every hair on my body stood up, because suddenly I remembered. The accident. The mechanic. The unexplained brake failure. The near miss that almost sent me off a bridge. At the time, everyone called it bad luck, including me. Now, it looked like a warning, or a failed attempt. And if Marcus was right, someone may have been trying to kill me long before that plane ever left the ground. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? For weeks I believed I was investigating an affair. Then I believed I was investigating insurance fraud. Now, I was investigating attempted murder. And the worst part? The suspect wasn't some stranger. It was the woman I'd loved for 8 years. The next morning, Marcus arrived at my motel carrying a thick folder. His expression alone told me things had gotten worse. Much worse. He dropped the folder onto the table. You need to see this. I opened it. Inside were maintenance records from my truck. The same truck that nearly sent me off a bridge 3 months before the plane crash. At the time, the mechanic had called it an accident. A rare mechanical failure. Bad luck. But these records told a different story. Someone had loosened the brake line intentionally. Deliberately. Professionally. My stomach tightened. Can they prove it? Marcus nodded. The mechanic kept photographs. I looked up. Why? He thought it was strange. The room suddenly felt smaller. Because accidents happen. But sabotage? Sabotage means intent. And intent means someone wanted me dead. Then Marcus showed me the security footage. A grainy camera from the repair shop parking lot. The image wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. A man approached my truck late at night. A man wearing a baseball cap. A man trying to hide his face. At first I couldn't identify him. Then Marcus froze the frame, zoomed in, and pointed at the wrist. A silver bracelet. Unique. Distinctive. Expensive. My blood ran cold. Because I'd seen it before. Many times. On Derek's wrist. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I whispered, "Oh my God." Marcus nodded. Exactly. The evidence wasn't enough for court. Not yet. But it was enough to terrify me. Because it confirmed one thing. Derek wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was connected to the sabotage. But the biggest shock arrived 2 days later. Angela Pierce made a mistake. A massive mistake. The kind guilty people make when they think they've already won. Marcus had been tracking several business records linked to Derek. Most led nowhere. One didn't. A storage locker, rented under a shell company, paid in cash, visited frequently, and for some reason, Angela visited it too. That night we watched from a distance. Just after sunset, Angela arrived first, then Derek. The two entered the unit, stayed inside for nearly 40 minutes, then left separately. The moment they drove away, Marcus smiled. It's our turn. We entered the storage facility legally, using information provided by management after Marcus showed his investigator credentials. What we found inside changed everything. Boxes, documents, computers, financial records, hard drives, and one large safe. The safe was locked. The boxes weren't. I started opening them, one after another, and every single one made the situation worse. Fake business accounts, hidden transactions, offshore transfers, insurance records, property purchases, millions of dollars moving between people who supposedly weren't connected. Then I found a folder labeled Carter file. My hands instantly froze. Carter. My last name. My file. I opened it slowly. Inside were photographs. Of me. Dozens of them. Leaving work. Going to meetings. Walking into restaurants. Driving home. My stomach dropped. Someone had been watching me. For months. Maybe longer. Then I found something even worse. A printed copy of my life insurance policy. Highlighted. Annotated. Studied. As if someone had spent hours analyzing it. Certain sections were circled repeatedly. Especially one number. $2,500,000. The exact amount Emma received. I looked at Marcus. Neither of us needed to say it. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't an affair that got out of hand. This was planning. Careful planning. Then Marcus found the safe key taped beneath a desk. And everything changed. Because inside the safe was a flash drive. Just one flash drive. Nothing else. No money. No utility. No contracts. Just a single black drive. The kind people use when they're hiding something important. Back at the motel, we plugged it into Marcus's laptop. Several folders appeared. Videos, photos, audio files, spreadsheets, hundreds of documents, and one recording, simply labeled Emma_call.mp3. My pulse immediately spiked. I clicked play. At first there was static, then a voice. Emma's voice. I felt sick instantly. The recording was dated 17 days after the plane crash. 17 days. At that point, everyone still believed I was dead. Or so I thought. Then I heard the words that changed everything. What do you mean he's alive? The room went silent. Marcus and I stared at each other. Neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. The recording continued. A male voice answered. Someone from the hospital. Someone explaining that a survivor matching my description had been identified. Emma already knew. She knew. 17 days after the crash. My hand started shaking. Not from anger. From disbelief. Because that meant everything afterward was a lie. The insurance claim. The funeral. The relationship. All of it. She knew I was alive. And she said nothing. The call continued. The hospital employee explained that identification wasn't fully confirmed yet. There were legal complications, communication delays, medical restrictions. But the possibility was real. Very real. A survivor existed. And Emma knew it. Then came the sentence I'll never forget. The sentence that killed whatever love I still had left. Emma asked, "How certain are you?" The employee answered, "Approximately 90%. A long pause followed. Then Emma spoke again. Quietly. Coldly. Emotionlessly. "I hope you're wrong." I stopped the recording. The room became silent. Completely silent. For several seconds I couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what I'd heard. My wife, the woman I would have died for, had learned I might be alive. And her first response was, "I hope you're wrong." Marcus looked away, giving me privacy, giving me dignity. Because there are moments so painful another person shouldn't witness them. This was one of them. Eventually I gathered myself. Then opened another folder. Inside were emails. Dozens of them. Most between Derek and Angela. But one email stood out immediately. Because it mentioned me directly. The subject line read, "Problem not resolved." I opened it and felt my blood run cold. The email had been sent just 3 days before my unexpected return home. It read, "If Carter is confirmed alive, everything falls apart. Emma must stay calm. We need to know what he remembers before making any decisions." I stared at the screen. Again, and again, and again. One sentence kept replaying in my head. Before making any decisions. What decisions? What exactly were they planning to do if I came back? Then another realization hit me. A terrifying one. Derek, Angela, Emma. They didn't know where I was. But they were actively monitoring the situation. Meaning they were scared. Scared enough to discuss contingency plans. Scared enough to hide evidence. Scared enough to prepare for my return. And desperate people make dangerous choices. Marcus slowly closed the laptop, then looked directly at me. "Ryan." "What?" His expression turned serious. Dead serious. "You can't stay hidden much longer." I nodded, because I already knew. The game was almost over. I had proof of fraud. Proof of conspiracy. Proof Emma knew I survived. Proof Derek was involved. Proof Angela helped cover everything up. What I didn't have yet was justice. But that was about to change. Because while Emma thought her dead husband would never come back, I was already planning my return. And this time, everyone was going to watch. For 6 weeks, the world believed I was dead. For 6 weeks, my wife collected sympathy, collected insurance money, collected a new boyfriend. And for 6 weeks, she believed she'd gotten away with it. That illusion ended on a Friday night. The irony was almost poetic. The event where I planned to reveal myself was a charity gala. The same type of glamorous event Emma loved. The kind full of wealthy donors, cameras, reporters, and influential people. The perfect place to maintain appearances. The perfect place to pretend to be someone you're not. Which made it the perfect place for the truth. Marcus and I spent 3 days preparing. Not for revenge. For proof. Because accusations mean nothing. Evidence means everything. We organized every document, every recording, every email, every financial transfer, every insurance record, every photograph, everything. By the time we finished, we had enough evidence to destroy every lie they'd built. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, live orchestra, champagne flowing endlessly, people laughing, people networking, people pretending. I stood outside the entrance for several moments, looking through the glass doors, watching, waiting, breathing, because once I walked inside, there would be no turning back. Then I saw her, Emma, wearing a black designer gown, smiling for photographers, laughing beside Derek, looking happier than she'd ever looked during our marriage. At least that's what it seemed, until you looked closer, really looked. Then you noticed something different. The smile never reached her eyes. The confidence looked forced. The happiness looked rehearsed, almost as if somewhere deep down, she knew this day was coming. Derek wrapped an arm around her waist. The cameras flashed. The crowd applauded. And for a brief moment, they looked like the perfect couple. Then I opened the door and walked inside. At first, nobody noticed. Why would they? As far as everyone knew, Ryan Carter was dead. A memory. A tragedy. A framed photograph on a shelf. Not a man walking through a crowded ballroom. Then someone screamed. A woman near the entrance dropped her drink. The glass shattered against the floor. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Music faded. One by one, people looked toward me, and their faces changed. Confusion. Shock. Disbelief. Fear. The entire room seemed to freeze. Then Emma saw me. I'll never forget that moment. Never. The color vanished from her face instantly. Her champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble floor. Her lips trembled. Her eyes widened. And for the first time since I'd returned home, I saw genuine emotion. Pure terror. Ryan. The word barely escaped her mouth. It sounded like she'd seen a ghost. In a way, she had. The room erupted. People whispered, pointed, gasped. Some actually stepped backward, because they had attended my funeral. They had watched my coffin lowered into the ground. And now I was standing 20 feet away, alive. Derek looked like he was about to faint, which was interesting, because innocent people don't usually react that way. I slowly walked toward them, the crowd parting around me like water. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Every eye in the room followed me. Finally, I stopped directly in front of Emma. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she started crying. Instantly. Violently. Like a dam breaking. Ryan. Her voice cracked. Oh my God. She stepped forward, trying to hug me. I stepped back, and the pain on her face was immediate. Not because I rejected her, because she realized I knew. I thought you were dead. The lie came automatically, instinctively, almost impressively, except for one problem. I had the recording. I looked directly into her eyes, then asked one simple question. If you thought I was dead. Her face tightened. Why did you tell the hospital you hoped they were wrong? The room went silent. Completely silent. Emma froze. The tears stopped instantly. Because she knew. She knew exactly what I was talking about. Derek's expression changed too. The confidence disappeared. Replacing it was panic. Raw panic. The kind criminals feel when they realize the evidence exists. Marcus stepped forward, carrying a tablet, connected to the ballroom's presentation system. The giant screen behind the stage flickered to life. And suddenly, everyone was watching. The recording played. Emma's voice echoed through the room. Crystal clear. Impossible to deny. I hope you're wrong. The silence afterward felt deafening. Hundreds of people stood frozen, listening, processing, understanding. Emma looked like she might collapse. Ryan, please. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. The screen changed. Emails appeared. Financial records. Phone logs. Photos. Every secret they'd hidden. Every lie they'd told. Every connection between Emma, Derek, and Angela. Displayed publicly. For everyone to see. Then came the insurance documents. The payout. The timeline. The suspicious approvals. The hidden communications. Everything. One piece at a time. Until the entire puzzle became impossible to ignore. Angela Pierce tried to leave. She never made it to the door. Because two detectives were already waiting. Marcus had delivered the evidence earlier that day. The investigation had begun hours before the gala started. The timing wasn't accidental. When the detectives approached Angela, the entire room watched. She knew immediately. Her face turned white. Then she started crying. Then she started talking. And that's when everything truly fell apart. Because Angela folded almost instantly. She confessed. Not everything, but enough. Enough to save herself. Enough to destroy everyone else. The detectives led her away. And suddenly Derek realized something. He was next. For several seconds, he stood perfectly still. Thinking. Calculating. Looking for a way out. Then he did exactly what cowards always do. He betrayed Emma. She knew. The words exploded out of him. Emma spun toward him. What? Derek pointed directly at her. She knew everything. The room erupted again. No. Emma shouted. Don't do this. But Derek was already talking. Talking fast. Talking desperately. Trying to save himself. The affair started before the crash. We planned to be together. She wanted the insurance money. She knew he might be alive. She told me not to say anything. Every sentence hit her like a bullet. Because every sentence was true. Or close enough. You're lying. Emma screamed. But nobody believed her anymore. Not after the recording. Not after the documents. Not after the evidence. For years, she'd built her life on appearances. And now, those appearances were collapsing in front of hundreds of witnesses. The police arrested Derek that same night. Not for murder. Not yet. But for conspiracy. Fraud. Evidence tampering. Financial crimes. Enough charges to keep him busy for a very long time. Emma wasn't arrested immediately. But the investigation quickly expanded. And the deeper investigators dug, the worse things became. Over the following months, everything unraveled. The insurance payout was reversed. Assets were frozen. Accounts were seized. Property was investigated. Phone records were analyzed. Emails were recovered. Hidden transactions were exposed. Eventually, the truth became undeniable. Emma hadn't caused the plane crash, but she'd absolutely exploited it. She'd knowingly participated in fraud, knowingly concealed information, knowingly attempted to profit from my presumed death. And that distinction didn't save her. The trial lasted almost a year. Long enough for every ugly detail to become public. Long enough for everyone to see who she really was. The final day of testimony was the hardest. Because Emma took the stand. And for the first time, she stopped lying. She looked different. Older. Tired. Broken. Nothing like the woman from the gala. Nothing like the woman who smiled beside Derek. At one point, her lawyer asked a simple question. The question that changed everything. Do you still love Ryan? The courtroom became silent. Even I wasn't prepared for the answer. Emma started crying. Real crying. Not performance. Not manipulation. Real grief. Then she whispered, yes. The room remained silent. But I loved money more. You could hear people breathing. Nothing else. Emma lowered her head and continued. I kept telling myself I deserved more. I deserved a better life. I deserved wealth. I deserved success. Another tear rolled down her face. And somewhere along the way, she looked directly at me. I stopped appreciating the man who was already giving me everything. For the first time, I believed she was telling the truth. Not because she wanted forgiveness, because she finally understood. And understanding came too late. The judge sentenced her months later. The details weren't important. The consequences were, because by then she'd already lost everything that mattered. Derek lost his freedom. Angela lost her career. Emma lost her future. And all three lost the thing they chased most desperately: money. A year later, I stood beside a lake outside the city. The same place Emma and I once visited together. The same place where we'd planned our future. Funny how life works. Sometimes you return to old places as a different person. The sun reflected across the water. The air felt calm, peaceful. For the first time in a very long time, I felt free. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "You finally done looking backward?" I smiled, then typed my reply. "Yeah, I think I am." Because the truth is, surviving the plane crash wasn't the hardest part. Surviving betrayal was. But eventually I learned something important. The people who betray you don't destroy your future. They reveal who doesn't belong in it. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, looked out across the lake, and walked forward, not toward revenge, not toward the past, toward a new life, a better life, one built on truth. And somewhere behind me, the ghosts of my old life finally disappeared.